All right, we continue on with our News 3 Coaches Corner series, and happy to be joined by Kings Fork head coach Anthony Joffrion. Coach, thanks a lot for making the drive from Suffolk here to our Norfolk studios. Obviously, you guys have kicked off practice. Got to be an exciting time for you guys.
Yes, sir. And I just want to start off. You have a wonderful voice on the microphone.
Thanks, man.
You have a very distinct voice. So when you talk, it means something.
Well,
you know?
That goes. Everyone gives me trouble because I can't turn it off. So I'm at the dinner table talking like this, and everyone's like, Mark, stop, and I really can't. But as good as I am at talking, you're as good at coaching football.
Yes, sir.
So you guys have a lot of high hopes for this year, and
yes, sir.
The excitement started this week.
Yeah. So we started our first day of practice yesterday. We had over 80 kids out. Very exciting. As an experienced head coach going into year 6, you really got to utilize these helmet days where the kids just have helmets on. So it's been a lot of teaching, a lot of installing. So, it's exciting. Going into year 6, it feels, just like it's year 1 again. Besides, having a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old now. So now they want to come to practice. They run around. So you're trying to coach and be a dad at the same time. So all those old head coaches out there, I know I'm only 33. I feel your pain.
Well, so which is tougher, coaching football or both are rewarding, football and dad, but both present their own set of. We have 4 at home, so our own their own set of challenges, which is I guess they're different though in a little ways, right?
Yeah, so I would say coaching. When you speak to a kid, you got football, and things like that. But with kids, I actually treat my kids the same way I treat the football players. So some of the players are actually very surprised. I'm like, hey, get over here. They're like, hey, you say the same thing to me. So I actually, the same way I coach the players is actually the same way I coach my kids. So it was interesting. But I do have a daughter, so I had to be mindful.
Right.
So that's interesting. But, it's great having them at practice, handing out popsicles and things like that.
Spill cereal, run sprints, or there things like that at home?
Yeah, and then I make them run at practice too sometimes. I make them run. Speaking of spilling stuff, so me and my wife, we had got a house built a couple years ago in Suffolk. So we moved into our house. We're like, let's get a nice white couch. Seemed like a great idea at the time. That couch is brown now. The couch is brown.
Well, some things you have to go through to learn, and now for next time. But
never again.
You guys are one of these teams that seems to reload and not rebuild. So obviously, there's some excitement. You have some key pieces coming back. Well, I'm sure you're also trying to fill some holes.
Yeah.
What's kind of the outlook like that for this year, and how are you guys able to do that reload rather than rebuild structure?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing for us is middle school football. So a lot of our kids, we have them in 7th grade, 8th grade. They have a lot of similar coaches. So in 8th grade, they actually play JV in Suffolk, which is huge. So we have a lot of kids who've been in the program for years, so they know the scheme, they know the system, they know how to work out. So when they transition from JV to varsity, it's not really a big change. But I am excited for this team. Our quarterback, Miles Satchel, he's put on 20 pounds this offseason. He started the last 3 games last year, played really well up until the regional championship game. But I'm very excited, to see what he does going into his senior year.
Can that be key? It was only 3 games, but 3 big games and at important times. Can that be key to propel a kid into the next season?
Yes, I think it's huge because he probably could have been the starter, going into the year. But, I just feel like he wasn't ready yet. Me and him had that conversation. And he continued to get better through practice, which a lot of kids don't do at times. When they don't get their name called, they, sometimes they pout. Sometimes they don't put the work in as if they're a starter.
Right.
But he was one of those kids, like every day he just attacked it and continued to get better every day in practice. And, it's just great to see his growth. He went from being a JV starter as a sophomore to, winning 2 playoff games last year. So, I'm very excited for him, going into his senior year.
Well, and he has a good target, at least one good target, in Anthony Henderson. It's got to be nice to have a guy like that back, who's kind of a, hey, just chuck it towards his general direction and he'll probably catch it.
Yes.
And a guy, for Anthony, who already has his college decision made going to Maryland, so he can kind of just focus on his senior season.
Yeah, so Anthony Henderson, he's been great. He was having a great season up until, he had an injury, and, kudos to him, and his family. He decided, he played through that injury.
Yeah.
And as a coach, as a parent now, I did everything in my power to try to protect him. But I'm really excited for this year. He's been in the weight room. He's put on like 15 to 20 pounds. He'll be an early graduate this fall. So, I know mom and dad, and his sister are counting down the days till he leaves. But, I'm just very excited for him. The growth he's shown as a leader. as a captain. Very excited for him this coming year.
We got Miles, we got Anthony. Who are some other guys? I was talking about this with Coach McCain over at Maury. There are always the guys who we haven't heard of, but we start to say more consistently on Friday nights.
Yes.
Who are some of those guys for the Bulldogs?
So, Jalen Thomas, he's a guy who's kind of under the radar. He's been a 4-year starter in high school. He's started since his 9th grade year. So I'm very excited him, going to his senior year. He's done a great job, modeling for a lot of these young guys. Tyler Jordan, is another guy who's started for the last 3 years. So I'm very excited for him, going into his senior year. And then we have some kids, we have over 5 kids with Division I offers. So Alvin Holland, our left tackle, he has over 15 scholarships, great kid, great family. Then Tyler Williams, who plays right beside him. So we should be able to run the ball if we can't, My old line coach is actually Marty Asper. He's been a head coach, Grassfield, Churchland. Me and Marty going to have some words, but I know he's going to get it done. But Tyler Williams, really big kid. He has over 10 offers at left guard. And then one kid, Taraji Harry, he actually picked up an offer at ODU a couple months ago at their 707, lineman challenge, which was really excited for him. He had Raji's going to hear this. It's going to be funny. So Raji always had like a fro. So, I said, hey, man, why don't you just cut your hair, get a clean look. I'm just messing with him. And he showed up to ODU with a fresh hairline, fresh cut. He looked like a whole different kid. And he went out there and played like I never seen him play. He actually ended up getting an offer. So, every time I see him now, I'm like, hey, man, make sure you get that fresh cut.
Yeah, I was going to say, now you're very serious about the fresh cut because obviously it translates into results.
Yeah, I think we all need to get fresh cuts.
Yeah, I mean, if that works, we'll get a fresh cut right after this. We talk about your success and you talk about some of the young guys coming up and everything like that. When you have the track record of success that you guys have at Kings Fork, do you feel like it's easier for the players to buy in?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's very easy. The kids, from Suffolk, they really want to prove that our city plays football, like serious brands of football. Before I was the head coach here, we've had 3 straight 11-win seasons, and then before that, every year winning 10 games. But before that, there hasn't been a lot of success of football in Suffolk consistently.
Right.
So we've shown that you can be a consistent winner in Suffolk. I think we just got to take the next step, which is winning the state championship. And I think for us, our kids understand that, the coaches, and now even the community, So, it's just very important for us just to keep working and not make these mistakes that we make against state championship level teams and coaching. So, we all have to do a better job.
Now, when we talked last year, speaking of the community, you said that your team has kind of a reputation of an NFL team that sometimes those in the community will remind you of.
Yes.
Do I have that right?
Yes. Yeah. What's funny about that? So when I said that last year, right, you'll be surprised how many people just with a Cowboys hat, I don't know who they are. I'll be in Food Line, they just run up on me. What do you mean about my Cowboys? The Cowboy. I'm sorry, Cowboy fans. I apologize. But yeah, we are kind of like the Cowboys. Our kids. So it's just like it's a running joke now in the school, in the community. They're like, oh, we are the Cowboys. So, we got to make Jerry Jones proud and try to get it done this year. But yeah, so yeah, we just got to win those big games.
Yeah.
The last 2 losses, regional championship to, Maury won the state championship, and then to Oscar Smith. So, we just got to find a way. We're a really good team. We got to try to be one of the best.
5 state championships throughout the last 3 years combined between the 2 teams you just mentioned. And you talk about big games, and you have plenty of them in the Southeastern District.
Yes.
I mean, there have been guys who have said the Southeastern District's like the SEC of Virginia.
Yes.
It's hard to argue with them, especially, from top to bottom. We even saw some of the teams who maybe didn't make the playoffs give some other teams problems who were your consistent frontrunners in the district. So it feels like every Friday night you guys are running a gauntlet.
Yeah, I would say just, I played at Ocean Lakes. We used to have sold-out games. And I coached a year at Oscar Smith, and, I've been at Kings Fork as well. Just the Southeastern District, it's just a lot of tradition, a lot of culture, community-driven. And it shows on Friday nights. Like, we actually have student sections in the Southeastern District, which is kind of crazy. And it's just very competitive. And then, really good coaches. I've come to know all the coaches in our district. And if you really look at it, we have really strong coaches, from top to bottom. Sometimes, you might have a rough year, wins and losses. But consistently, you can't not coach for a week in the Southeastern District.
Speaking of which, I mean, you talk about Suffolk and the city of Suffolk in football. I mean, you have a lot of big games, but to me, there's not much there aren't many games you can compare the rivalry to. Up with the best rivalries are you and Nansemond River.
Yes.
Because those games, like you said, the students, it's rowdy, it's loud, it's noisy. Two neighbors going up against each other. I mean, that's football in Suffolk at a showcase, man.
Yeah, so us and Nansemond River, I think that's, one of the best rivalries, consistently, maybe the last couple years. We've come out top, I want to say the last 4 times, but, it's always a great game.
Right.
A lot of the kids, grew up together. And then, what's crazy is a lot of the coaches actually grew up together, but now they're on opposite sides. So, you got family feuds. It's just a great environment. I love that week. And then this year it'll be week 10. I think it'll be their senior night. So, it's going to be a great atmosphere. Nansemond River is always well coached. Coach Ricks does an amazing job. So, yeah, I just love that game. It's just rivalry football at its finest. It reminds me when I was at Ocean Lakes, our rival at the time was like Bayside. Mm-hmm. They had Trey Nicholson, Mizell, Deion Stitt at quarterback. They were loaded. And
Quinn Blanding year?
Yeah, Quinn Blanding was young.
Okay.
I actually coached Quinn's brother, Kayvon Blanding. He actually came to Kings Fork his last year. But, yeah, it was like those type of games, where it's, high energy, involved crowd.
And you guys definitely showcase that, not just with that Nansemond River game, but week in and week out, rather. I mean, it seems like you guys have your fans show up quite a bit. It's got to mean to have that kind of a lot to have that community support.
Yeah, it's huge. So when I first got to Kings Fork as the head coach, I want to say it was like the year after COVID. And, the games, some people would be at the games. It would be decent crowds. But when I really saw it transform is we went to the state semi.
Yep.
We were playing Verina. And I was joking. I was telling all the coaches, hey, man, make sure your wives come, make sure you bring your cousins, make sure they come to the game. And I'll never forget it. Went out there pregame, and it was, like, packed. The whole stadium. Wasn't even enough room to sit. And ever since that moment, I've kind of seen how the community, like, really loves football.
Maury's that team in your region that seems to have everybody's number. Have you guys sat down and talked at all about, the step you have to take or a certain thing you have to do to get from the 9 to the 10 level, so to speak?
Yeah, so for us, it sounds cliche, but it's being disciplined. And I know a lot of people say, hey, be disciplined, be disciplined. But it seems we've lost to, we're more disciplined, from coaching and, from the players playing. I've talked to Coach McCain a couple times. He's very organized, detail-oriented. So, we have to take that, as a staff to the next level and as players. So I think the biggest thing, the analogy I use for the players, right? So if you see if you're walking in the neighborhood, you ever seen somebody walk a dog without a leash?
Sure.
And, he'll look at the dog. The dog is very respectful. It listens. It's good to go. But when I walk my dog in the street, my golden retriever, it's on the leash. It's trying to run everywhere. Uh-huh. I can't walk my dog without the leash. Then you have some dogs when you walk them, it'll go a little fast and things like that. It might see a kid or another dog, it'll go crazy. So the thing for me is we need to just be disciplined and understand that, sometimes we can be off the leash, which is we're having fun, we're engaging, but at times we need to get back on that leash and be disciplined. And, we are the Bulldogs. We've had Bulldogs at our game. We just got to be disciplined. And from coaches, I got to be more disciplined. At times I need to be on the leash when it comes to certain things. So we just got to be more disciplined. I think that's the next step. We just got to be a disciplined team.
I don't want to breeze past your point here, but you said you've had live Bulldogs at your games? Yes,
we've had live Bulldogs. But then you know how it gets. You start having Bulldogs at games. What if they get bit? What if, so we couldn't have them anymore. But we did. We had, I wanted to have like a little playground for them.
Yeah, like Uga almost, like in Georgia.
Yeah, like a nice little playground for them to play. We had some parents who actually had a whole bunch of Bulldogs. So one game, we used to do it every year for homecoming, have like 6 Bulldogs out there. Yeah.
Would you consider a live Bulldog mascot consistently?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. So, I'm going to talk to my principal, see if we can get that done. But, I think, it makes the kids decide, like, we got Bulldogs out here. And then when I was actually an assistant, our head coach, Scotty Littles, he actually had a Bulldog. His name was Zeus, and he used to bring him out to practice. It was hilarious.
So here's the thing, too, right? I have a Bulldog myself. And, for all the mascots that are Bulldogs across the country, when you meet the actual Bulldogs, they're not that tough.
Yeah, they're not
kind of big teddy bears.
Yeah, they're
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Are you who has Meatball?
Me.
That's you.
Yeah.
Yes, you have Meatball.
Yeah.
Yes. Is that actually your dog?
Yeah.
It is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So
and he chooses every day off the dog ball. That's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, for the game of the week.
Do you train him for it? You could be honest.
No,
you
don't.
He honestly just chooses.
He only just chooses, and that's kind of which is why, I mean, and I'm certainly not going to throw any schools under the bus here, but there are some lopsided matchups where he picks the school that is the underdog.
What's Meatball's record?
So he's actually pretty close to 500, I would say, career-wise.
Hey, he's better than most people.
I think he went 8-5 last season.
Oh man!
So he's starting to learn, but a fun thing that we can do every Friday for a game of the week to people enjoy.
I look for it every week. I'm like, where's Meatball going to pick?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you need Meatball to be, I don't know if you could afford him, but
how much are we talking?
Yeah, I mean,
Meatball at a game.
We'll talk about royalties if you want him to be your mascot.
If you ever come to Keysport, bring Meatball.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. I'll see if I can get the exemption to bring him in the company car.
Yeah.
Now you guys are going to kick off with. We talk about your Southeastern District schedule, but you kick off with Wise, and you make the trip there.
Yes.
So I mean, you guys aren't shying away. You're going to get prepared right away for a very tough schedule. Right. Start out throwing the fire.
Yeah. So that's going to be it's going to be a fun trip. So we're going down Thursday the night before. We'll drive down, eat dinner, and then have lights out. And then the next day we're actually going to eat breakfast as a team in the ballroom of the hotel. And then we're actually going to go to the African American Museum, tour that, and then we'll have lunch by the National Lawn. I think I'm saying that right. And then we'll get back on the bus, and then we'll head to Wise. So it's going to be a fun trip, but at the same time we need to understand why we're going to Maryland.
Right.
So I'm interested to see how we respond with all the activities that we do have planned when we go there. But it's going to be fun, man. A lot of our kids never even been to Washington, D.C. and seen that area. So, it's going to be interesting to see. It's just good to get these kids out of Suffolk. They get to see, other places. And
you're rolling it in. It's going to be almost like a college trip,
yes.
which is pretty cou, which I think, gets some of these guys ready for the next level, too.
Yes. Yeah. So it's going to be exciting. Wise is a really good team. Last year they actually lost in the state championship, and they lost in the state championship the year before. So they're a playoff state champion level team. So it's going to be a really good game, now, just like it was last year.
It was a very good game last year. And I think you guys came from behind in that game.
Yeah, so we had they had a lead in the fourth, and then we were able to to flip the tables at the end of the game. So it'll be exciting, in their place. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a very packed environment for them.
Coach, we're going to let you get out of here in just a couple of minutes, but first I got to ask you, you're a guy who obviously relates to his players very well, have an established leader, everything like that. Is there a high-profile coach in either college or the NFL or anybody like that who you emulate or look up to or admire or anything like that, who you try to, take after a little bit?
Yeah, let me think. It's a tough one. I've never been asked that question. That's a tough one. I really like James Franklin, and I actually like Ricky Ronnie as well at ODU. So I'll do Ricky Ronnie.
Okay.
So Ricky Ronnie is a very high energy. I've been able to, we've coached, at his tournaments, and he's been out there, and we're kind of similar in ways because he's crazy too. He's crazy, but he loves his kids, and then he just loves coaching. You'll be surprised a lot of people that coach don't really truly love it. He's out there, and he's just having a blast as if, he was a teenager. And it's just great to see that. And then with James Franklin, he's very detail-oriented. When I was at Oscar Smith, he actually came to the school, recruit a couple of our kids, and he took his time. He was talking, to us and the staff, the head coach, he's still the head coach, Chris Scott, and he took his time talking to us, and he's just very engaging, relationship-driven. And this one I realized when you're on, at Penn State level, you have, a person that follows you around and does your agenda. So the guy was like, we got to go. And Franklin did not want to leave. But if he didn't leave, he wouldn't have been on schedule for the rest of his day. So that's when I know you made it, when you have, a person that follows you and makes you follow an agenda.
All right, so your list is live mascot and person to follow my agenda. And
yes.
Yeah, right, okay. Yeah. So the list is growing for Coach Joffrion's needs.
Sir.
Coach, we want to thank you very much for making the trip down here. Thanks for coming in. Best of luck to the Bulldogs as you guys kick off the 2026 campaign.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.